You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Today, we are talking to Mindy Isser. She's an organizer and a union member of the Communication Workers of America, Local 1180. She is a writer out of Philadelphia and has written for a myriad of publications, including Scalawag, Jacobin, Current Affairs, The Nation, and is a frequent contributor to In These Times, which is why we're talking to her today. We're talking to her about her most recent piece about the importance of organizing people that don't have the same ideas as we do. Both David and I consider ourselves very left-wing, but if you consider yourself a unionist, which David and I do, it's important to organize people that are conservative, our sisters and brothers that have different ideas about different things than we do. We can't ostracize them because that's not how you build a strong union. It's very timely, given the given everything that we've seen, and an article came out yesterday, which was a partnership between ProPublica and AL.com, which was. I mean, this is just the perfect time to be having this conversation because everybody knows there was an Alabama man that died at the Capitol. His name was Kevin Greeson, and he was the vice president of the UFCW Local 88T at the Goodyear plant in Decatur. The plant is now owned by a Korean manufacturing firm. It is still union, actually. It's still the same union. UFCW Local 88T, they're still there. But he was the vice president at that union until 2006. He went to Obama's inauguration because he was such a fan of Obama. And he got sucked in to a right-wing rabbit hole. And before the end of his life, he was talking about how Obama needs to be executed on Parler. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. And this is why we wanted to be on this station. Mindy, I'm not sure how much David told you, but this is a conservative station. This is where Sean Hannity got his start. The program before us is a financial management program that was talking about how corporate taxes are always paid by consumers and workers, never by corporate executives, which we know is a lie because the tax cuts on corporations went completely to corporate executives. We did not see a cut in prices, and we didn't see the raising wages from that. They got all the money there. So if tax increases all are paid by consumers and workers, then you would think that tax cuts are benefiting consumers and workers, but we know that that's not true. And listeners of the station know that that's not true because they know their lived reality. But this is why we wanted to be on the station, because these are the things that the folks that listen here that's what they're told. That's what they're told all the time. And so, Mindy, that was a long introduction, but I wanted to give you just a bit here at the beginning to give us an overview of your article. What was kind of the premise of your article, and what did you say there?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
And good morning. And good morning, and thanks for talking to us. Sorry, I'm so excited about this conversation. I think it's so timely and relevant to what we're doing, and so I just got carried away. But thank you for talking to us, and good morning.
Yeah, good morning. No, you don't apologize. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for your work. I guess I should just say why I wanted to sort of explore this topic, which is that I'm a unionist. That's how I identify. That's the root of my life and my work. And in 2015, when Trump was running, I was really bothered by all of the stories about Joe the plumber kind of people. Yeah. Reporters would go to these diners, find some working class people who went from Obama to Trump, and just that was the whole story. There was no real why there, and most importantly, no real how do we fix this, or what caused this phenomenon, and how do we fix it? And so that was really, really what I wanted to explore. And so I spoke to a handful of union members who either had at one point been registered Democrats or who had voted for Democrats in the past, particularly Obama, and to understand what drew them to Trump and where they were at politically now. And honestly, it's daunting, the work that we have to do, but I do feel strongly, like you were saying, that this is our work to do. It is our job to organize our class. It is our responsibility to talk to people who might have views that we personally find disgusting. And, it's not to say that this isn't like a romanticization of working people. It's not, oh, you work for a wage, that makes you a good and pure person. It's that working people have the power to change our society because of the work that we do every day, because of our ability to not work. And so that's the basis on why we need to talk to working people, even if we disagree with them. And of course, there are going to be people who we're never going to be able to reach, whose sympathies lie with their boss, and those people need to be isolated and ignored. But for people who are in, the mushy middle, we need to bring them over to our side.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the people that we can't reach that are sympathetic with their boss, because I believe at some point you can win a lot of those people over, because eventually everybody sees that their boss is not on their side. At some point, the ones that I look at that I feel like we can't reach and probably shouldn't reach are those that are overtly racist or overtly fascist, and both of those terms get used a lot on the liberal talk shows and in the liberal media, and with liberals in general. And I think to its detriment, they probably get used too much. But I feel like those are the people that we don't want to bring in. But back to your article, you in the beginning you talked about the loss of electoral votes with the wages of under $50,000 per year, and most of us in the labor movement are making well in excess of $50,000 a year, unless you're one of the people working at UFCW at Kroger or something or other like that. So I feel like we've lost a lot more of those votes than what your article lays out, and I think for good reason. And I'm constantly Jacob is more of a liberal type, leans more towards electoral politics. I'm more of the anarchist type that leans more towards I hate both parties. But I can see, because I've seen it with my own two eyes in this state, how, and the article that he laid out before, how the Democrat Party has left the working class behind. I mean, the only time they ever talk to us or do anything for us is, or say they're going to do anything for us, is at election time. And so your article was well written, but my question would be, is it so much that we need to win the right wing or moderate faction of union members back, or is it the fact that the Democrat Party needs to bring the working class to reconsider the policies that they're making and move away from corporatist policies and more towards working class policies?
That's a great question. And I think it's both. And I think they relate to each other. So yeah, I think we need to be engaging our union brothers and sisters on issues in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Too many unions are not really having the conversations that they desperately need to be having with their members. And I understand why, it's a question of priorities, putting out fires here and there, and, things like Janus and other anti-union legislation that unions are dealing with. And, there's a lot of competing priorities, but I do think organizing our coworkers is really important. And I also think,
we're going to bring you back on the other side of the break, and we'll let you finish that thought.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
folks. Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. We've got a really exciting episode for you today. We are talking to Mindy Isser about her most recent article in These Times magazine about organizing Trump union voters. And David asked a really good question before we went into that break, and it was, there's a certain aspect of Trump union voters leaving the Democratic Party, which is a trend that may be sort of problematic. But on the flip side, there's definitely a perception, and to a certain extent, that there's a bit of truth there, that the Democratic Party has left the union voters.
Not just the union voters, working class in general.
Right. And so you were kind of teasing that out as we went into the break. So I'll let you finish your thought there.
So I guess one thing I'll say is that we should be very clear that a huge chunk of working people do not vote at all. They don't vote for Democrats. They don't vote for Republicans. They are just completely out of the political sphere in that way, because what you're saying is that, working people don't see themselves represented. They don't feel heard. They don't feel like it will matter how they vote. And then also, similarly, Trump's base primarily is just the average Republican base, petty bouge, small business owners, rich people. That is the Trump base. And yes, he did get a portion of the working class. That's absolutely true. And we need to try to bring those people back. But it's also not like a working class revival for Trump. Most working class people don't vote at all. So that's the big thing. And then, thinking about the Democrats, I think there is a really big question of what the Democrats will do next. And personally, I think that the left wing of the party and even the center right wing of the party needs to be 100% focused on passing the PRO Act. That has to be the number one priority of every single Democrat right now, both because we desperately need to expand and strengthen the union movement. Like yesterday, we need to do it, but also just selfishly for the Democrats, because union members are more likely to vote. They're more likely to vote Democrat. If they want to have a majority and keep a majority, they're going to need more union members. And so just thinking, if I were Chuck Schumer or whoever, I guess not him, but if I were a Democrat anywhere in the country that isn't a definite Democratic stronghold, I would be thinking, wow, I need desperately to expand union density in my district so I can hold on to my seat. As selfish as that is, we want that too, because we want more workers in unions.
Right. And that's, you mentioned the selfishness of that, and it's really interesting how Republicans understand what you're saying. Republican office holders understand what you're saying, because they think of that selfish, how do I keep power once I get it thing. We can look at Scott Walker in Wisconsin. The first thing that he tried to do was he passed Act 10, which destroyed public sector unions in Wisconsin. And what do you know? After that, Wisconsin goes to Trump. I mean, it's clear when Republican office holders get into power, they do things to structure society such that their power is more easily held onto. They destroy working class organizations. They destroy centers of working class power. And they do voter suppression. They make it harder to vote. Things like that. Gerrymandering. And Democrats just seem totally averse to just the most selfish calculus of how do I keep power. Like it's totally not in their analysis.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Republicans totally, deeply understand the power of unions in a way that Democrats oddly do not, because Democrats are so dependent on unions, and not just like contributions or resources, but union members to be literally soldiers on the ground for them. And we've seen that the special election in Georgia and obviously the presidential election, Unite Here specifically really threw down to get Biden in office and to win those seats in Georgia. And they couldn't have done that without them. And so, Democrats need to really take a note out of the Republican book and truly understand the power of unions, and also the transformative power, how they transform individual workers and make them political actors.
Yeah, and a good way of doing that, going back to your article, and folks, we had somebody on YouTube ask about the article. Could we link to the article? So we sent the link in YouTube. But if you're listening out on the radio, the article was in These Times, which is kind of a labor-oriented periodical that comes out. So you can find the article if you just go to Google and search Mindy Isser, and all of her articles on in These Times would come up. But the talking points of the Democrat Party have been so poor. One of the things you pointed out in the article was that one of the union voters looked at the economy and said, well, the economy's doing great, so, and Trump is the reason behind this, so we want to try to keep him in power. And my question is, yes, the economy is doing great. We talk about it every week. The economy was doing great under Obama too. I mean, the trajectory is basically the same under Trump as it was under Obama. We're seeing the exact same growth. The problem is we're not seeing the exact same growth in our wages and in our benefits and the things that we need to see happen. So, but the Republicans has got everybody convinced that if the economy is doing great, then everybody's wonderful. And yeah, Wall Street's wonderful. The CEOs are wonderful. But the working class people are taking it in the ass. And it's happened for the last 50 years. And the Democrats, other than the few progressives, Bernie, AOC, and a few others, are speaking about it. But everybody else is just kind of acting like everything's wonderful. You know what? I don't get it. You know, and I guess my question is, what can we do to force them or to make them realize there's votes to be had out there, but they've got to start talking to working class people.
Totally. I mean, I think it's a two-pronged thing. It's like we need desperately to raise class consciousness in this country because, like you're saying, people are like, oh, the economy is great. That means I'm great, even if there's like no food in your fridge or whatever. Yeah. And you know, it's a horrible time right now. Obviously, we have not seen unemployment at this level since the Great Depression. COVID is, you know, destroying entire communities. I guess the one silver lining, if you can call it that, is that maybe it is, in a way, raising some class consciousness with our fellow workers, people who are told that they're essential employees, that they're heroes, healthcare heroes, grocery store heroes, but they're struggling to pay.
Charge upon the land, a population burned up, bled dry. The marginalized multiply and unite to fight. You awaken the world, now they're tearing you apart.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we have Mindy Isser. She is a frequent contributor to In These Times. We're talking to her about her most recent article on organizing the Trump Union voter. And we were talking on the other side of the break, we were talking about how, it's really amazing because Trump has been able to convince people that the economy is doing so much better under him when all of the trends are basically the same. Wall Street CEOs, stock market is going up at almost exactly the same trend line as it did under Obama, and wages, benefit packages, and total compensation for working people has stayed the same just like it did under Obama. And so you've got a real kind of real difference in success of messaging here. You've got these folks convinced that the economy is the stock market and the economy is doing good, and so I've got it great right now, when everything is the same as when Trump came into office, more or less.
Yeah. So, throwing it back to you, Mindy. Let me apologize because I am completely screwing up this timing on the show. The whole thing has just got me off this morning. But what is your opinion? in your opinion, does the party need to do to make these people realize, or to help these people realize? I say make them that everybody's struggling, and the economy is not tied to your paycheck. Certainly not tied to your paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, the party needs to make a decision. I mean, just to put it really bluntly, if they want to be the party of workers or they want to be the party of bosses. And for a while, they've tried to straddle the line to be both. And you really can't. And so they need to make a choice. And I do think another part of this is revitalizing the union movement and pushing people to understand their status in our society, for lack of a better term. And that is what's so powerful about union organizing, because it's people having conversations that they normally just would not be having, and talking about their real problems and getting them to actually think about them and think about the cause of them and understand that they don't have to be embarrassed that they're struggling. And it's not a personal failure. It's a societal failure. And someone needs to do something about it. And if the Democrats want to be the champions of the working class, then they need to be the people to do something about that. And right now that means monthly checks to every single person in this country.
Yeah, and it brings it's something that I sent to you on the email last night. It brings up the point of, we have a good progressive portion of the party that pushes for these things, that does not want to see austerity measures, that doesn't start their campaign fundraisers off with union busting law firms, and they are constantly demonized, not just by the right, who we expect them to demonize them, but by the majority of their own party, and it's so frustrating. And it's kind of the point that I constantly make, is I don't see how we can bring more people in so long as we're fighting the moderate Democrat, and we're also we're fighting the right wing, and then we're also fighting the moderates in the party. I don't know. It's frustrating, but I guess the question would be, we as a working class are apparently not making our voices heard. What would be your opinion or your thoughts on how to bring this whole thing together? Because I really don't see a path. The path that I see right now is in 2022, the Republicans take over Congress again. In 2024, they have a supermajority with the presidency and Congress as well, because everybody's shooting themselves in their feet.
Yeah, no, that's a really depressing thought, and I think it's definitely possible if the Democrats don't wise up very soon. I also think, not to be like blindly optimistic or hopeful, is that the left wing of the party, it's really new. I mean, all of this happened since 2015, basically. I mean, since Bernie ran the first time. And time is very long, and like, we have just not been in this fight electorally really very long at all. And we've had some really big successes, both federally, statewide, and municipally. And so I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing and get sharper and smarter and do it better. I mean, there's no easy way. There are no shortcuts, as Jane McAlevey says famously. And it's just about organizing and fighting and pushing. And I really do think, like, every unionist in this country should be singing in our heads, "The union makes us strong." That should be guiding us with everything we do. We should be talking to our coworkers, whether we're in unions or not. And even if we are in unions, yes, still talking to our coworkers and making sure we're getting people like Bernie Sanders and the squad in office. And that just means talking about work all the time.
Right.
Yeah, well, and I didn't mean to sound depressing, but I mean, I've lived for 50 years and I've seen the same thing happen. I tell Jacob all the time, I've went through numerous administrations, both Democrat and Republican, and we always end up with the same thing. The one positive that I see coming out of this cycle is the painters union, the IUPAT, organizing around the PRO Act like you spoke of earlier, and I think that, like you said, could reinvigorate not just the party but the working class and the union movement, the labor movement in general. And this wasn't really covered in your article, but what are your thoughts on, because I've seen both sides. I've seen a lot of people say there's no chance in hell we're ever going to see this get through. Then I've seen some people say there's a good possibility. What do you think about that?
I think we have to try. And not only do we have to try, I mean, it has to be our number one priority. And I know there's a lot of competing priorities right now and a lot of things that people want to get done. But I really do believe that everything comes back to the union movement. We don't have other social goods without a strong working class movement. We don't have abortion rights without a strong working class movement. We don't have anything without that. And so that needs to be every single union's first priority, every single working class person's first priority. And we need to find a way to make it sexy and to talk about it and to get people excited about it. Because when you say the PRO Act, people are like, what's that? But it's like, you deserve a union. You deserve to be able to form a union. Most people don't know how hard it is to actually organize, especially in places like the South with right to work laws. And, you know, I think there's nothing we can do but try. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons from trying to pass EFCA, or at least I hope we learned a lot of lessons from trying to pass EFCA. And we can use those lessons, and we can use the fact that unions were completely instrumental in defeating Trump this time into actually putting some pressure on these Democrats to make sure it passes.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that, you mentioned how important the PRO Act is for building working class power, which is more or less synonymous with building union power, and how that is important for everything else. Anything that is good for the working class, a more organized working class is going to help that, and so the PRO Act is going to help that. And I've talked to some people that are outside of the labor movement that are very progressive and very left leaning about the PRO Act, and they're just they're just like, I mean, I just don't really care. Like, they're like, fine, I would like for it to pass. That's all well and good if the PRO Act passes, but it's like, they're like, I'm not writing to my senator about that. Like, I don't care. I want tuition forgiveness. I want debt-free college. I want health care. I want Medicare for all. I want those $2,000 checks. Things like that. How do we make people care? How do we make people outside of the labor movement care about the PRO Act?
Totally. I think that's a great question. I mean, you can tell them straight up, there is no debt-free college, there is no Green New Deal, there is no Medicare for all without a strong labor movement. And we have a opposite of that. We have a very weak labor movement, and we are going to need boots on the ground fighting for Medicare for all, tuition-free college, a Green New Deal. And we will not have the capacity to have those boots on the ground without millions more people in unions.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that unions are also, I mean, my international was one of the first ones on board with universal health care 30 years ago. 30 years ago. So everybody that thinks that this is some kind of new pie in the sky program that dropped out of the air out of the benevolence of the progressive wing, they're idiots. We've been calling for universal health care since the 70s. We were one of the first ones to sign on to Medicare for all. And the talking points on the right has been the union doesn't want it because they've got better health care packages. And that's absolutely false. Absolutely false.
Right. The people that are really actually serious about this, they understand, the union members that are actually serious about this, they understand that having, healthcare takes up so much of negotiations. When it takes up so much of your compensation package. If you remove that from the negotiating table, if you remove that power from the boss, it makes it so much easier. Because one of the things that we've seen over and over, strike after strike, is we'll have articles and articles about people being worried because their healthcare is taken away during a strike a lot of times if they've got healthcare through their job, and that's a lot of power that a boss has over the employees. Mindy, have you got time for one more segment? I've got a couple more things I'd like to ask you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I'll just kind of preview it on this side of the break, and then I'll let you answer on the other side. But we've been talking a lot about elections and a lot about legislation. I'm kind of interested in how do we about actually building power within a union, because actually a lot of these people a lot of folks who are in unions that are right wing, not only have they become more right wing as far as their electoral voting patterns, they have actually lost faith in the union, and they have and they are less enthusiastic about the union. And if they don't have a union in their workplace, they're more likely to say, like, we don't need it. We don't need a union in my workplace. And so how do you actually, how do you make people see the what do you think about making people see the value in having a union in your workplace if they don't have one? And so we'll talk about that on the other side.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Lonely dead, stuck, bleeding pig. Lonely ditch, I choose to dead.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Here is my co-host David Story. On the line, we have Mindy Isser. She is a contributing writer for In These Times magazine, talking to her about her most recent article about organizing Trump Union voters. One of the things that we talked about on the other side of the break was how will building union power build support for how will it build support for progressive policy goals? And I kind of roasted somebody that I know that's kind of left leaning, and because I had told them about the PRO Act and said, building union power is important for all of these things, and they're listening right now, and they texted me, and they said you still didn't explain how unions will actually fight for health care. Mindy, I asked you another question, or how building union power gets you health care or free college, things like that. I asked you a different question on the other side of the break, but if we could quickly address that, I think that would be useful, because we just said that unions have been supporting it, which is true since the 90s. The Machinists Union has been supporting universal health care since the 90s, but we didn't actually say, okay, how does actually having higher union density make health care, free college, things like that more possible?
Yeah, totally. It's a really good question. And I mean, it's not as simple as like more unions means Medicare for all tomorrow. If it was, that would be really awesome. But it's not. And to be clear, there are unions that are opposed to universal health care. There are union members that don't necessarily understand, Medicare for all. And we need to definitely have conversations with those members and push those unions to do the right thing. But I mean, the way it works is kind of simple. It's organizing regular working class people to take action in our society, which sounds simple, but actually it's hard. And it's hard because it works. And that's why politicians have made it nearly impossible to form unions, because they truly understand the power of them and the power of getting workers to understand that they have the right to be politically active. And when they come together with other workers, they can be politically active and they can make change. Additionally, obviously, when workers pool their resources with their unions and make political contributions through their unions, those unions can be very powerful and help swing elections, just like these billionaires and these right-wingers, except our money comes from ourselves and our work and from pooling it with each other. And so just the fact that working people can come together to take action and to pool their resources, that's powerful. And there really has been very few social gains made without the power of working people and the power of their organizations.
Yeah, and well, if I could just interject for a minute before we move on to the next topic, one of the things that most people don't realize, and I've brought it up on the show a couple of times, but without the labor movement, there would have not been a civil rights movement. I mean, the fact that UAW personally took money out of their pockets to bail Dr. King out of jail whenever, and
the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters provided transportation.
Exactly. And the fact that the people that are lobbying the Democrat Party right now are the healthcare industry. The only pushback to that is through the labor movement and
National Nurses United.
Yeah, and our PACs and our lobbyists. I mean, it's as simple as that. There is no other path to it other than through in my opinion, other than through the labor movement.
And you wouldn't have had Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security without the involvement of the labor movement. The labor movement was very instrumental in passing all of those things. And let's look at the union density rate when all of those things passed. We're looking at 30% union density rate at that time.
Because workers wanted it.
Because workers wanted it and workers were organized, and so workers got it. So I think that's a really good answer, Mindy. Thank you very much for that. And so the question that I asked before the break was, how do we get people to actually see the union as something that benefits them? Because there's a caller that we've had actually he's a good brother. He's a member of the letter carriers, and he's a Trump supporter. Okay, he listens to this station. I hear him call into the station all the time when it's not us, and he's called into the station with us. He supports the union. He thinks the union is fine and good. He understands that the union has got him his pension and his health care. But he doesn't see that as like he doesn't vote on union rights, and he knows that Democrats are more supportive of unions than Republicans are. But he said, "Well, look at the stock market one time with us," and it's like how do you get people even that have a union in their workplace and that are supportive of it? But there are a lot of people that have a union in their workplace and they're not supportive of it, and then there are a lot of people that don't have a union in their workplace and they're not going to fight for it. So how do you get people to see that the labor movement, having a union, is like really the best thing that they can do for making their material circumstances better?
Yeah, great question. And it's hard. I mean, I will say that a lot of people do want to be in unions. A lot of people want to be in unions. Unions have their highest approval rating that I think they've had in decades. People want to be in unions. There are just so many barriers to actually doing it. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're always going to find a disgruntled union member or whoever, but I really think the way forward is through engagement and through struggle. It's like, yeah, people are like, yeah, I like my union, whatever, who cares? Well, right. You wouldn't think that if it were gone, because that means your pension's gone, and that means your health care is gone, and that means your health and safety program is gone. And so it's one of those things, like you treat your romantic partner like crap, they leave you, and then you're like, oh, damn, I should have been better to them because they were really, really great, and I'm never going to do better. I mean, it's a silly, analogy, but I think in a way it's true. People get so used to being in a union. They were never in their, it's not like they formed the union at their workplace. They came into a union job. They experienced the pay and benefits. They thought, hey, yeah, this is good, but they don't actually know the difference. And so really hammering home that union difference, doing political education with members, showing them how hard it was to get the union. My mom is a letter carrier. And so understanding, the postal strike of 1970, I think, that actually transformed the Postal Service and created collective bargaining rights for letter carriers is huge to make sure people like that know what's going on, because you have to know what things were like before the union and how hard people had to fight for the union and had to go on strike and risk huge fines and risk their job forever just to make their workplace better. And for someone to do that for you decades in the future without knowing you is huge and such a sacrifice. And I think if more people understood the sacrifice that all workers in this country and around the world took to have a voice in their workplace, and for us to have a voice in our workplaces now, I think people would have a little more humility and take a second to think, wow, my union really does mean something. And just to show people how hard the rich and the politicians are fighting to take your union away from you. That should tell you something. Why do billionaires not want you to be able to be in a union? That should make you want to fight like hell to keep your union and to strengthen it.
And rightfully so, you pointed out earlier, and there that the pensions. One of the things that the unions have brought forward was the pension. But the fact is, we in our local, we lost our pension 2 contracts ago, It was froze 2 contracts ago. It was sold off this last contract. And everybody wonders why are we losing these things? But they refuse to recognize that the loss of power, not just the loss of union density in our area, but also the loss of legislative power in our area. No one's the Republican Party wants us all on 401ks. You know, they don't want. The companies do not want to fund pensions.
Right.
And so we've slowly lost them. But also to the point that you were making, that people have become bystanders in their union. You know, everyone needs to be involved. One of the reasons that I got so involved in this union, although I've been a union member since I was 16, I come into this union, and the people that were hired before me had just come off of a 91-day strike for my retiree health care. Not for theirs. They weren't losing theirs. They were losing new high retiree health care. And I looked at that and I thought, these people just sacrificed 3 months of their lives for me, somebody that they didn't even know. I've got to step up to the plate and be active in this union. So
that's powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
It's the most powerful, and I think truly personally transformative thing. I mean, we saw this in 2019 when UAW struck at GM. That was really about workers in the future and younger workers. It wasn't about people close to retiring. It was about their wages, their health care.
Yeah. Man, Mindy, I could talk to you for the rest of the program. I've really enjoyed this, but I'll go ahead and let you go. I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much. This has been, I think, one of my favorite conversations. Where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
I guess on twitter.com. It's just my first and last name, and I have a website, but it's boring. But I also had a really nice time. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was truly a pleasure. We were talking in the break that this has been one of our favorite interviews so far. Not just because of who you are, but because of
what you said.
Yeah, what you said, and I think that's important to get out to all the listeners out there.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly why we wanted to be on the station. Both of us are left-wing folks. We thought about trying to go to the local NPR affiliate, but we were like, we want to reach the conservative folks because that's where we are. I mean, we're in Alabama, and if we can't reach conservative people, then we're gonna lose. We're gonna lose. So, Mindy, thank you so much for talking to you. This is the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. We appreciate your time. If you want to see what we're doing throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. And you should really go follow our Twitter, folks. We are like 4 followers away from having 1,000 followers on Twitter. Look, the Twitstagrams, the Twit chat, the
Twitterverse.
Yeah. So you should follow us there. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, then you can search YouTube for the Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there. And we also clip segments and release it throughout the week. So if you don't want to watch the whole show, just one topic seems interesting to you, you can go back through our catalog and see the different things that we've talked about. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We have a website now. You can go there and check out our work as well, thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then you can consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport.
Yeah. Believe it or not, the corporations are not coming out of the woodworks to help sponsor this show.
Right.
So
and you can tell from our advertisers. Our advertisers are unions, local progressive nonprofits, and union law firms. So and occasionally like other progressive podcasts. So we're really thankful for the advertisers that we do have, but listener support really goes a long way.